Hey peeps, Sarah here from Sparrow Springs, and today we are working on a loose acrylic painting. And while I'm working on this acrylic landscape painting, I will be talking to you a little bit about painting loosely, or sometimes referred to as painterly. We will talk about what it is and how you can achieve something similar. Now, this painting is based off of a photo that I took in Israel at Caesarea Philippi. Now, some people don't know this, but when they visit Caesarea Philippi, that there are actually a ton of trails behind the archaeological site, and this gorgeous waterfall is near the end of the trail. So if you're ever in Israel, definitely check it out. 5 stars, highly recommend. Now, before we get into our topic for today, let me just say, today is day 9 of my Tubetober challenge, where I am posting 1 video a day for the month of October. I'm actually kind of surprised I've made it this far, and it really makes me question what I'm doing with my time. I had trouble getting this far just with Inktober, and all I had to do was draw, so whatever. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications to see when I post all of those new videos. And back to our regularly scheduled art program. Painterly, sometimes referred to as loose painting, basically means that you aren't going to be working as tightly. We aren't concerned about getting the details exactly right. It's not photorealistic. You're mainly blocking out shapes that suggest whatever it is you are painting. Now, this is not to say that it's just careless or just throwing paint wherever you feel like, but with a loose painting, you have the ability to work freely. You can move your horizon line, eliminate rocks that don't work with your composition. You don't have to slave over making every tree stand out. So at this point, then you would focus more on your composition, your contrast, colors, and textures. Now, some things you may notice about working loosely is that brushstrokes are more visible, a lot of times because an artist will use more paint and then you get more paint mixing on your surface rather than on your palette. Now, this doesn't really apply to watercolor as much as it does to oils and acrylic, and I don't always use a ton of paint in mine either, but I think that's kind of something about the Impressionist kind of style, but this can apply in the painterly kind of realm as well. Elements of the painting are interpreted more like shapes rather than objects or subjects. So thinking about clouds, you know their general shape, but there's a lot of nuances in the shadows and density of a cloud. But in a loose painting, we just want to suggest that it's a cloud rather than copy a photo directly or getting every brushstroke perfect. Colors are often not photoreal, but are more up to how the artist chose to interpret it. So for example, the colors of the tree on the right-hand side of my photo are much more grayed out, but I chose to make them kind of a similar vibrancy to the ones on the left. My water is much more blue because that was something very distinct that I remembered about the waterfall, is just how blue it was in comparison to other waterscapes I've seen. Your values are going to be a bit more exaggerated. High contrast is the key here. Let the shapes of your shadows and highlights suggest what you are trying to paint. Now, I see a lot of mixed opinions on whether painterly and impressionist are the same thing. From my understanding of being painterly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it's more of a characteristic of the style of the impressionistic art movement. So the classic impressionist artists had this very painterly style with their visible brushstrokes, distinctive colors, attention to lighting. But there's a couple things that were unique to impressionism itself. So they painted very everyday subject matter, like still life, portraits, landscapes, city streets. Now, at the time, mythological and allegorical paintings were much more common. Another trait would be how the artist would crop a scene or arrange their composition, because oftentimes when they weren't so heavily focused on the details, they could work quickly, and they almost created these painted snapshots of life. Okay, so that was kind of a lot of an info dump, so let me sum it up on some of the advantages to working loosely. It's a lot easier to portray movement and emotion in a piece because your lines aren't so rigid and calculated. So you'll place lines and strokes in a place that feels right rather than where it's realistically supposed to be. A lot of times you end up with more texture, which can kind of aid this effect. And because of this, you can focus a lot more on an appealing composition. To enhance your composition, you often end up learning more about lighting and color in your observations when you're not so concerned about the detail, anatomy, or realism. Generally speaking, you can also work much more quickly when you are simply laying in shapes or blocks of color. Now, you can also work loosely when drawing, which is another topic, but this can also help in the same sense of wanting more movement or interest in your work. Now, this isn't the same as gesture drawing necessarily. I guess like the term of working loosely, I would say kind of goes into the concept of gesture drawing, but again, I think that working loosely is a characteristic of gesture drawing. So that about sums it up. Post in the comments what you think of this kind of painting. Do you prefer more realistic images, or do you prefer this kind of painterly sort of style? Now, for myself, I know I've shared this in other videos that I was more about realism and getting everything like detail perfect for a long time. So I'm really kind of enjoying painting more loosely, just because on the one hand, yes, I can work a lot faster, and I don't really have a lot of time to spend a ton of time on paintings anymore, so I like being able to work quickly. But I also do like the fact that lighting and color comes out a lot more in my work when I'm working loosely, which is actually something that I really struggled with when I was all about the realism. You know, I wanted each color to be exactly photorealistic, and it just in the end kind of looked like very dead, flat sort of thing. Like, I don't know, you get like the American Gothic kind of feel to it, where it's like I just painted this thing that looks like it's just standing there. There's no expression, there's nothing to it. So that's something I definitely see in just for myself working more loosely. So I like it. I do like realism, but I would say that I've come to appreciate this. So stay tuned for more videos, you guys. If you're interested, I have included all of my Tubetober videos in a playlist that I will link in the description. So that's all for now, peeps, and I will see you tomorrow.